I want you to imagine this. A group of people are handed a stack of cards by neuroscientists. Each card has one word on it: brave, creative, stubborn, capable, lazy, disciplined, anxious, smart. The people are asked to sort these cards into two piles: words that describe them and words that do not. Simple enough, but what researchers discovered was far more important than the card sorting itself. People did not neurologically process every word equally. Words that matched their self-image were processed faster, remembered more easily, and carried more psychological weight. In other words, the brain was not simply reading the words. The brain was filtering reality through its own self-identity. And that should make all of us pause and consider deeply about how we think about ourselves. Because if our brain has already built a model of who we are, what we're capable of, and what is possible, then every experience you have is being interpreted through your own perception. That means your brain is not just remembering your past, it's predicting your future. And the question is this: is your model accurate? You don't need to know a lot about neuroscience, but everyone should know this. Your brain is not just some recording device like a memory in a CPU. It is not passively collecting information and sorting it neutrally for later. The brain is a prediction machine. At every moment, it's running a model of the world, a simulation, if you will. And at the center of that simulation of the model is you, who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, and what is possible for you. And here's the part that matters most. Your brain often acts on that model before you consciously think about it. That means before you speak, before you try, before you take a risk, before you raise your hand, before you step onto the stage. Your brain has already made a prediction of the way that's going to go. It's not a destiny, but it is a prediction that can influence the outcome. But here's the important part. Those predictions can be all wrong. However, if those perceptions are repeated long enough, reinforced often enough, they begin to feel like truth, both for the positive and the negative. This is how identity forms, and that is how your future gets quietly built. In 1977, Stanford psychologist Hazel Marcus introduced a concept that would become central to our understanding of identity. He called it self-schema. A self-schema is a mental framework your brain uses to organize information about you. When you ask the questions, am I capable? Am I disciplined? Am I someone who succeeds? Am I someone who struggles? Once those schemas form, all new information is filtered through this schema. Your brain does not process all information equally. Information that confirms your self-schema gets accepted quickly and reinforced. Information that contradicts your self-schema often gets questioned, discounted, or ignored, and takes significant work to modify. Think about what this means. A student who has internalized the idea, I'm not good at math, does not simply just struggle with math. They begin to interpret every math experience through that prediction. A wrong answer becomes proof. A difficult problem becomes confirmation. A slow start becomes identity. And even when they succeed, the brain may explain it away. Oh, that was just an easy problem. Oh, I got lucky on that one. I wouldn't have been able to do it if the teacher didn't help me. The evidence changes, but the schema remains fixed. That is the danger. Because many of our deepest self-schemas were not chosen by us. They were built early, through repetition, through family systems, through school experiences, through peer feedback, through pain. A child does not need to be told you are not capable 1,000 times to begin believing it. Sometimes they only need to experience repeated failure without the right support. Sometimes they only need to be labeled. The struggling kid, the distracted kid, the difficult kid, the quiet kid, the one who always needs help. And over time, the brain starts filling those experiences under a very dangerous category. This is who I am. So we have to ask the question how schools may accidentally reinforce this identity. Now, let me be clear. I'm certainly not here to attack schools or teachers. Schools are filled with people who care deeply about children. But systems can shape identity, even when nobody intends harm. And one of the most powerful things a school system does is give children repeated feedback about who they are. Grades, groups, tracks, labels, the awards they give, test scores. Some of this feedback is necessary to bring out the best in children. But all of it is identity forming. Every time a child receives feedback, their brain asks, what does this mean about me? And that question matters. In 2006, researchers studying mindset and feedback found that students' beliefs about intelligence shaped how their brains responded to mistakes. Students with more fixed views of intelligence tended to respond differently to errors than students who believed intelligence could grow. Students with a growth mindset were more likely to treat feedback as a useful tool, nothing more. Their brains treated the mistake as something to learn from. However, students with a fixed mindset saw the mistake as affirmation of their own incompetence. That difference matters because the same feedback can produce two completely different futures. One student sees the wrong answer and thinks, I'm not good at this. Another student sees the same wrong answer and thinks, this is information I can use. Same mistake, different schema, different future. Now ask yourself, what did your education train you to believe about yourself? Were mistakes treated as part of learning or as evidence of who you were? Were you encouraged to experiment or rewarded for getting the right answer quickly? This matters because children are not simply learning content. They're learning about themselves. They are building the model their brain will use to interpret all future challenges. And if that model says, I'm not someone who can do hard things, the child may stop trying long before the potential has been tested. Let me give you a real example. I have seen this in students for years. A child struggles in math in third grade. At first, it's just a hard subject. Then it becomes a pattern, then a reputation, then a sentence. I'm just not good at math. By sixth grade, that student is no longer only struggling with math, they are protecting an identity. They avoid the problem before the problem has a chance to teach them. They say, I can't, before they even try. They disengage early because disengagement feels safer than failure. And that is how the schema works. It does not just interpret that failure, it tries to prevent future pain. But in protecting the child from discomfort, it can also protect them from growth. That is why this matters. Because education is not just about information, it's about formation. So how do we rewire ourselves? If identity is shaped by repeated experience, then identity can also be reshaped by repeated experience. In 1949, neuroscientist Donald Hebb gave us one of the most important principles of brain science. Neurons that fire together, wire together. In simple terms, the more your brain repeatedly does something, the better it becomes at doing it. Every repeated thought, behavior, emotional response, and action strengthens certain neural pathways. Repetition builds neuronal structure. The brain adapts to what it practices. That is both the problem and the opportunity. If you repeatedly avoid public speaking, your brain becomes better at predicting danger when public speaking. If you repeatedly tell yourself, I'm not disciplined, your brain gets better at finding evidence for that identity. But here's the secret. The reverse is also true. If you repeatedly act courageously, even in small ways, your brain begins to update the model. If you repeatedly finish difficult tasks, your brain begins collecting new evidence. If you repeatedly practice the identity you want to build, the prediction begins to change. And here is the part we often misunderstand. The brain does not rewire through inspiration. A motivational video does not rewire your identity. A quote on a wall doesn't do it. A burst of confidence won't do it. Insight can start the process, but authentic repetition changes the brain. Sustained, deliberate, emotionally meaningful repetition. This is what updates the model. This is why friction matters. Friction gives the brain new data. Let me give you a 3-step process to interrupt this protocol. Step 1, expose your schema. You cannot rewire what you cannot see. The first step is to notice the prediction, not judge it, not fight it. When you hear yourself say, I'm not someone who speaks well, I'm bad with money, I always mess this up, write it down. That sentence may feel like a truth to you, but often it is just a mental prediction, a prediction your brain is using to prepare you for the future. Once you see it, you create distance from it. You are not the prediction. You are the person best equipped to examine the prediction. Because the moment you can observe a schema, you are no longer trapped inside it. That takes us to step 2. Introduce controlled contradiction. The brain updates when prediction meets reality. If your schema says, I'm not someone who can speak in public, well, don't sign up for a TED Talk right away. Start a bit smaller. Speak once in a trusted meeting. Record yourself for 2 minutes, but don't show it to anyone. Ask a question in a group. You're not trying to prove the entire schema wrong in one heroic moment. You're creating new information for your brain to take in. Small contradiction, repeated often. That is how the brain begins to update. The old model might be telling you, this is dangerous. The new experience says, I survived this. The old model says, this is not who I am. The new repetition says, maybe this is who I'm becoming. That is how change begins. Not with a dramatic transformation, with controlled, repeated contradiction. And that takes us to step 3, repeated under attention. This is the part most people skip, the most important part. A single experience rarely rewires identity. The brain needs repetition, but not passive repetition, deliberate repetition, repetition with focus. If you want to become someone who speaks well, study the skill. Practice it intentionally. Small, repeated patterns. It will improve, and then you repeat it again. If you want to become someone disciplined, do not say, I need discipline. Build small, repeated acts of discipline. Same time, same place, same commitment, again and again. If you want to become courageous, practice courage at a manageable level. Maybe that's a hard conversation, a truthful sentence, a difficult decision, a moment where you do not avoid the thing your old schema wants you to avoid. This is how your brain changes. This is where my work on emergence connects so deeply to neuroscience. You will never emerge to be your best self by imagining a better self. You emerge through repeated acts of becoming your best self, and those acts require friction. The friction is not an obstacle. The friction is the mechanism of change. When it seems hard, that is the work you are putting in to change. Let me close with this. Hazel Marcus gave people a stack of cards and asked them to sort words into 2 piles, me and not me. Most of us have been doing this our whole lives. Capable, not me. Creative, not me. Disciplined, not me. A leader, oh no, not me. But here is what the research on self-schemas, mindset, and neuroplasticity helps us to understand. The model is powerful, but it is not permanent. The architecture can be rebuilt. The brain has predictions, but predictions can be updated. Your past matters. Your childhood matters. Your schooling matters. Your experiences matter. But none of them has the final word. The final word is written through what your brain practices next. So here's the question. What identity have you been unconsciously rehearsing? And what new identity are you willing to practice deliberately? Because you're not merely your history. You are the next deliberate decision you make. If this changed how you think about your identity and your future, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dr. Jonathan Strecker, author of Emergence. Stay strong.